What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm here to bring you the Season 3, Episode 8 review of The Walking Dead entitled Made to Suffer. Now, before I jump into this review, let me just tell you nothing really insane happened this episode, but there will be some spoilers just in case somebody's watching this. They don't want to know what happened in the mid-season finale because this is the mid-season finale. So just in case you don't want to be spoiled, just want to get that out the way right quick. And okay, so this was a pretty good episode. This I must say that this was a pretty good episode, and it was pretty much as explosive as I expected it to be, even though the twist at the end with Daryl getting captured and the governor turning on Merle, I totally was not expecting that, and I'm pretty much expecting one of them or both of them to die when we get back in episode 9. I'm fully expecting that, and if that doesn't happen, then it will be because of some contrived plot device, because they're standing there surrounded by the governor's people. They've got guns, and I'm pretty sure they're supposed to die. I'm not certain, but I'm just saying. And just in case you don't know, I've already alluded to this, but this episode is the mid-season finale, so there's going to be a hiatus, and episode 9 will not be out until I believe it's February of 2013, and the next episode is going to be entitled Suicide King. So just in case you don't know about that, yeah, we're gonna be, well, The Walking Dead is gonna be on a break for about 2 to 3 months, and this, for those of you who remember last season, that happened as well after episode, I believe it was episode 8, where the series didn't come back until like March or something. So yeah, so just in case you didn't know, we're not gonna have any Walking Dead for quite a while. Alright, so now on to the summary and analysis of this episode. Tyrese is finally here. Finally! I know a lot of people have been wondering what happened to Tyrese. Was he ever going to show up? And I wasn't. I'm not the type of person who goes on the internet and searches for information on The Walking Dead. I just kind of get the info as I watch the episode. So I was totally not expecting Tyrese to show up in this episode, but he did. Tyrese is now here. And so at the beginning of this episode, we see somebody running through the forest. And for those of you who don't know, I forget the name of the actor who's playing Tyrese, but I think his name is Michael Coleman or Dave Coleman. I'm pretty sure his last name was Coleman, but that's the guy who played Cuddy from The Wire. So if any of you are familiar with The Wire, you'll immediately recognize that guy as Cuddy. But anyway, we see Tyrese running through the forest, and he runs up to this woman who's presumably his wife, and she calls him Tyrese. So once I heard that, I was like, yeah, that's Tyrese. Supposedly he's an epic badass in the comic book. So hopefully he lives up to at least my expectations of him. But in any event, after he meets up with this woman, they're in the forest, and then they go and meet up with the rest of their group who are under attack by walkers, and so they have to fight off the walkers, and then they make it to what looks like the back of the prison. And I'm not actually sure if any of the people in the group actually know, but the entire back of the prison looks like it's just been destroyed. So anybody or any walker could just walk right into it. And so that's Tyrese and his group just run right into the back of the prison to get away from all of the walkers. And I haven't read the comics, although I know a little bit, some things that people write in the comment section. Apparently Tyrese is Rick's go-to guy. He's his number 2 in the comic books, and Daryl does not exist in the comic books. And it looks like what may happen is that Daryl will be killed off in the next episode, and Tyrese will take in will assume the position of number 2. But I'm just wondering, what kind of relationship will Tyrese and Rick have? Because like I said before, Daryl doesn't exist in the comic books, and apparently Rick and Tyrese met up earlier than they've met up in the TV series. I'm not sure about that, but it seems like that was the case. And I'm just wondering what kind of relationship Tyrese will have with Rick if Daryl does live, and what kind of role will he play within the group at large. And my guess is that based on what we see here with Carl saving Tyrese and his group in the prison, it looks like Tyrese will become and his group will become an important element in helping Rick in the fight against the governor. So my expectation, or at least my prediction, is that at some point the two groups will learn to trust each other. They'll combine, and then they'll combine their firepower to take out the governor. And I'm from what I've seen, I'm really liking Tyrese's characterization and his personality. He seems like a person who has a very, very strong moral compass, because there's several points in the episode where a girl gets bitten by a walker and Tyrese just absolutely refuses to leave her behind. And at one point it was rather striking and interesting because Carl says to him, "Look, you got to leave her behind." And Tyrese is like, "No way. I'm just not doing that." And it also seems like he's a natural leader, because from what we see, he's looks like he's the leader of that group. And we see that in one scene where Rick is about to shoot the girl who's been bitten by a walker, and Tyrese says, "No, we take care of our own here." So it looks like it's going to be an interesting mix between Tyrese and Rick's group, because, as you know, Rick is becoming more and more ruthless. But now we see Tyrese, who doesn't seem to have that sort of ruthless mentality that Rick's group has. So I think it's just going to be interesting to see how that relationship between those two groups develops and what role Tyrese will eventually play. And also, I got to mention this. Why did they have to kill Oscar? I mean, seriously, and I know some of my viewers I just knew I was going to have to mention this, but why did they have to kill off that brother? Why? I just don't get it. It seems like as soon as one black character is introduced, they kill off another black character. What the hell is going on with this show? I mean, do they have like a one black guy limit at a time? I don't understand it. We had T Dog, the only black character, that he gets killed off. Then we get Oscar. Then once we get Tyrese, Oscar gets killed off. I just don't get it. But this episode overall was just basically, to sum it up pretty briefly, Michonne guides Rick and the rest of the group to Woodbury to save Glenn and Maggie, and they do so. They actually manage to save Glenn and Maggie after an intense firefight, and after Oscar is killed, and even after at one point Michonne leaves the group to go and confront the governor. And Michonne is just such a badass. She walks right up into the governor's house, takes a seat, pulls out her sword, and just sits down and holds the sword on her lap like, "I am waiting for this motherfucker. I am waiting for him. He's about to get his comeuppance." And then, of course, like I've already mentioned, Daryl gets captured at the end. And yeah, him and Merle looks like things are not going to be going pretty well for those guys. But after this episode, the subplot with Andrea and Michonne has been clarified for me. And even though this episode was pretty good, this is the major problem that I have with this episode. So over the last couple of episodes, and even to some extent throughout this entire first part of this third season, there have been some very puzzling questions about Michonne and Andrew. The first thing that puzzled me as a reviewer is I never understood. It was clear that Michonne never trusted the governor, and that she had suspicions about the governor, and that she was trying to convince Andrea that there was something wrong with the governor and something wrong with Woodbury. So one puzzling thing for me was when, if you remember that scene where the governor comes back after he's killed all those military people and stolen all their equipment, and Michonne is looking at the military vehicle, and she notices that there's bullet holes in the vehicles, and she notices that there's some blood, and she actually questions the governor about this, and he has a response for everything. He's just like a basically a charismatic demagogue is basically what the governor is. He always has a question for everything. I always wondered why Michonne never came to Andrea with this information. I mean, if she's trying to convince Andrea that there's something wrong with the governor, something wrong with Woodbury, why didn't she ever mention this to Andrea? Listen, he had bullet holes in the vehicles. There was blood on the vehicles. I think he probably killed those military guys and stole their equipment. That puzzled me. The second thing that puzzled me, and a lot of other people mentioned this as well, I believe it was in either last episode or the episode before last, where people were asking and wondering, why didn't Michonne ever tell Rick about Merle and Andrea? That just seemed to be, it just didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense within the context of the episode. If Michonne is leading Rick and his group to try and save Glenn and Maggie, then it just makes sense that she would mention the fact that Merle and Andrea are involved in some way. And then the third thing that puzzled me was that when in the scene where Michonne has stabbed the governor in the eye, killed Penny and all of that, and Michonne and the governor are fighting, and Andrea walks in on the fight. Why didn't Michonne take that opportunity to explain what was going on to Andrea? She could have explained, listen, they had Glenn, they had Maggie, I'm with Rick right now. We're trying to save them. I told you there was something wrong with the governor. You need to get out of here. It would have taken 30 seconds for her to explain what was going on to Andrea, and yet she never does it. And this episode finally gives us some answers and some insight into precisely why it is that there seem to be these lingering plot holes for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 episodes or so. And apparently, it looks like the writers want to use Andrea as a plot device later on. And in the sneak peek after this week's episode, we actually see that the governor is suspicious of Andrea and thinks that she can't be trusted and that she may double cross him. So the only explanation I have for these lingering plot holes over the last 2 or 3 episodes is that it seems like the writers want to use Andrea as a plot device later on for her to double cross the governor. And to me, that's rather problematic. First, because obviously there's some plot holes, like I just mentioned, but second, because it it makes Andrea such a less likable character. I mean, and I know that I mentioned this in my last episode review. With each passing episode, I'm starting to become more and more disgusted with Andrea because what she's doing now is completely inconsistent with her character. And I know, again, a lot of people are saying, well, maybe she's just being won over by the fact that Woodbury is a nice place and she's tired of the apocalypse. And yes, I know. But this is ridiculously inconsistent with everything we know about her character thus far. Like I said, she's a down-to-earth person. She cuts through the bullshit. She's prudent. She's cautious. And now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, her character just changes. I'm simply not buying that. I'm just simply not buying that at all. And she sees that the governor's teamed up with Merle, and she knows what kind of person Merle is. She's been warned by Michonne. She sees the tanks, all the heads in the tanks when she uh sees when she walks in on the governor and Michonne fighting. She now knows about Penny. And also another plot hole. Remember when the governor killed that military guy? He put his head in a tank. And I'm just wondering, did Andrea ever see? Because Michonne actually breaks up the tank. She knocks them all over. The heads spill all over the floor. I'm wondering, did Andrea ever see the head of that military guy? because his head was in that tank as well. So that's, to me, another sort of plot hole that just, the plot holes in Andrea's inconsistent characterization is just, is really rubbing me the wrong way, that even after all of this, Andrea still sticks with the governor. She still stays with him. That's really rubbing me the wrong way. And to me, the writing is just so transparent that it's bad. I mean, these plot holes are easily identifiable, and it's very easy for you to understand why they're there. Because, like I said, they want to use Andrea as a plot device, and I don't like that kind of writing. To me, that's poor writing. That's kind of cheesy. And I especially don't like plot devices like this, because it's basically a waiting game, and it it just drags out a subplot that doesn't need to be dragged out. I don't like amnesia subplots or plot devices. I don't like, for example, the search for Sophia, that kind of thing where something just drags on unnecessarily. And I don't like it when people don't know the truth when they should know the truth. I don't like it when plot devices cause subplots to be dragged out unnecessarily. I don't like that. So now we basically have to play the waiting game. We just have to wait until Andrea develops enough suspicion to double cross the governor. So that's how that goes. And also, something else, some we get some more insight in this episode. So the governor, there was a scene where the governor goes into the room with all the heads in the tanks, and he starts playing music, and we find out that this is the same room where he's keeping Penny basically in a cage, caged up. And he's talking to her, and he's trying to get her to recognize who he is. He's trying to get her to make some sort of contact with her human consciousness, although it's pretty clear that zombies don't have any human consciousness anymore. And he gets angry when Penny doesn't recognize who he is. And this leads back to the science experiment from, I believe it was last episode, with the experiments with the walkers to see if they retain some form of consciousness. And it seems like that experiment was actually for Penny, because the governor is trying, well, he was before Michonne killed her. It seems like he was trying to conduct experiments on walkers to see if to see if they retain some semblance of consciousness, so that he would have hope for Penny, basically. So that's what that science experiment was all about. It wasn't clear in the last episode precisely what was going on with that science experiment, but now that was made clear in this episode. And also, in terms of the governor's characterization, they finally laid the full foundation for his character. Because I know I've been saying for the past couple of weeks that the governor has been somewhat disappointing. And then somebody in, I believe it was last week's episode, they mentioned in the comment section that I'd have to wait until Penny dies, because that's when the governor goes apeshit in the comics. And so finally, now that Penny has died, I have very high expectations for the governor, and I'm really looking forward to him just going all out apeshit, going all out crazy. I'm really waiting to see that, because like I said, so far the governor has been somewhat of a disappointment. All right, and just a couple of other things. I really liked some of the comic relief in this episode between Axel and Carol. So Axel is sitting on a bed in a prison cell with Beth, and I don't even know what they're doing. I think they're looking over a book or something. And Axel is obviously hitting on Beth, and he says to her, "So how old are you?" And Beth says 17. And he says, "Oh, that's interesting." And then we see the look on Carl's face, because it's implied that Carl has a crush on Beth, and we see the look on Carl's face. So Carl's like, the hell is this guy doing? And then Carol attempts to talk to Axel to let him know, listen, you got to calm down with all that. And then finally Axel says, well, listen, I've been in prison for so many years, and there's no girls around here, obviously, and Maggie's with Glenn, and you're a lesbian, and then Carol's like, wait a minute, I'm not a lesbian, and then Axel says, well, in typical Southerner fashion, he says, well, you got the short hair, and then Carol's like, yeah, but I'm not a lesbian, and so Axel's like, oh, you're not a lesbian? Very interesting. I just thought that scene of comic relief was was very funny, so I really like that. Also, I have some newfound respect for Glenn, man. I know I was getting on this case over the last 2 or 3 episodes about the fact that he should have shot Merle on sight. But in this episode, I mean, first of all, in the last episode, the way he took out that walker, even though he was strapped to a chair. And then in this episode, he's just showing what kind of survivor he is, how he makes a shank. I mean, he really makes a shank out of the bones from a walker. And I'm just like, damn, man, Glenn. Oh man, like Merle would say it looks like Glenn's finally got some hair on his balls. Because Glenn is just showing that he's an all-around survivor. So definitely have some newfound respect for him. And also, lastly, one final thing about Rick. And it's clear now that Rick was hallucinating about those phone calls, because it happens again in this episode where Rick has a hallucination. So it's in the middle of a firefight where they're trying to escape with Glenn and Maggie. They've already rescued Glenn and Maggie, and now they're trying to make their retreat out of Woodbury. And there's a guy walking towards Rick, and Rick is hallucinating. He thinks it's Shane, and you can see he's confused and disoriented. And this is actually the reason why Oscar got shot, because of Rick's hallucination. And I'm wondering now. So we've got 2 instances, well, more than that if you count all the phone calls as separate instances. But we've now got several instances where Rick is just hallucinating, and it looks like I'm wondering if this is just foreshadowing more and more Rick's mental breakdown. Because I've been talking about this all throughout this episode, and I'm just wondering where the writers are going with this sort of Rick hallucinating, Rick's mental breakdown. I'm just wondering where they're going with this. And at one point in the sneak preview that came on right after this week's episode, there was a scene where Carl seems to say to Rick, maybe you shouldn't be the leader anymore, or something to that effect. So I'm just wondering what will be the full extent of Rick's mental breakdown, because he's tripping out basically. So like I said, all in all, this was a pretty good action-packed episode, except for that those plot holes with Andrea and that whole thing, which I don't really care for too much. But like I said, this was a pretty good action-packed episode, and great cliffhanger at the end with Merle and Daryl. Like I said before, I'm almost certain that they're gonna die, and if they don't die, there's gonna be some sort of contrived plot device to keep them alive. But it looks like at this point, Daryl and Merle are, yeah, gonna be killed by the governor. So this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.